It was an early morning. The alarm kept going off until he reached out to it and began to search for it before finally turning it off. While brushing his teeth, our protagonist was still feeling sleepy. It was a day like many. The boy rushed to school while his mother urged him to have breakfast first. Yet, he declined while exiting the house, claiming that he didn't have time for it. Our hero then spent his day at school, studying and focusing on his classes before finally returning home in the evening. The protagonist then enjoyed some food while watching a stream where the star of the show claimed that he had psychic powers. Like any other student, our hero would end his day with a late-night snack. This was the life of the protagonist, who was just a normal boy. Yet there was more to this life than it seemed. Someone suddenly saw the boy. He felt startled as a toweringly tall acquaintance approached him, claiming that he was just on his mind. As the hero began to fear the worst, the tall one claimed that he was hungry. This was none other than Choi Chae-on-min, who threatened to beat up the protagonist if he didn't buy him food. This bully disrupted the peaceful life of our hero. Later on, the young man was savagely thrown into the wall. The bully firmly stated that his lackey should always do his homework for him while threatening him and delivering a savage beating. Just like that, the frail protagonist fell to his knees. Cho Chan-min and his friends were really entertained by the suffering of the one who panted. Yet, one of them claimed that they should stop it or risk ending his life. The tall one continued mocking the boy while slapping him on the head, making the frail hero apologize. The harasser claimed that he didn't need him to be sorry, but to do his homework, demanding him to only leave the school once he sent a picture of it being done. With that, the two others decided to join in, claiming that he should hurry up in order to finish their homework as well. The protagonist was left beaten up in the toilet, feeling great pain coursing through his body. Back then, when he got hit by a rock, he fell to the ground as his blood began to cover the gray concrete. Those passing by were left horrified. As a small child, the protagonist got into a huge accident that he was now unable to recall. Even so, he made a miraculous recovery and avoided a certain death. Yet, due to this tragedy, he began to suffer from regular cardiac and respiratory problems. His mother, who was the only supporter he had, was forced to shoulder her child alone. And despite his condition getting worse by the day, through the continuous effort of his mother, the boy was nursed back to health and managed to have a normal life. This regular life was only possible at home as our hero was forced to be labeled as a special case everywhere else. Due to his condition, he became an easy prey for boys. The normality that the boy enjoyed while being a middle schooler suddenly disappeared in high school. And just like that, his normal routine was turned into a tormenting cycle. After many efforts, the homework was finally done. Our hero was baffled by the fact that he had finished all of them in time. With the photo finally sent to the bully, the young man could finally take a break. Yet while sitting alone with his thoughts in complete silence, he began to grow frustrated. The boy began to think about his miserable life and when luck would finally be on his side once again. Yet while lost in his thoughts, he was suddenly startled by his phone that began to ring. Our hero was left confused as he was not expecting any calls. He was now being contacted by a mysterious number. The curious young man then picked up the phone thinking that it was the bully. Yet he was unable to understand what the caller was saying. He quickly assumed that it was the tall one and immediately claimed that he had finished the homework and sent the picture. Just then, someone called him by his name. A chill began to run down the young one's spine as an ominous voice claimed that he should listen to it in order to remain alive. The mysterious caller then asked him to go to the principal's office once the school went dark and only come out when he hears silence. He was told that he shouldn't go home or ask for help of any kind, but had to look for the hotel he would see in a window as it would be his only way to escape death. With that being said, the conversation was put to an end. This left Han and Bith rather annoyed as he assumed it was a bad prank made with a voice filter, and so the young man decided to head back home as there was no reason left to remain in the school when suddenly everything went dark. With the lights now off, our hero was left intrigued. He assumed that the power was cut off for a drill testing. After placing the lock on, the hungry Han Biff wondered if he should buy himself a cup of ramen before returning home. Yet, while thinking about the delicious meal, he suddenly spotted two figures. They casually passed by him. As he watched the two of them disappear into the darkness without saying a word, the young man began to think of how scary these individuals were. He assumed that they were thugs from outside the school. Han Biff, who had his doubts about these two, wondered if he should just go alert security. Yet, he decided to drop the matter and head home quietly. Only then did he realize that his classroom was the only thing present in the hallway that these two took. But as the young man went to check it out, wondering if they were truly here for him, he suddenly found himself right in front of the two horrifying presences. The boy found himself sweating bullets and immobilized as he was greeted with creepy eyes and terrifying wide smiles. One of the two men immediately recognized the protagonist as Han Bith and claimed that they had been searching for him for a long time. The man also stated that he was here to see if the boy had the item they required according to their intel. Han Bith claimed with a shaking voice that he didn't have anything that could placate their interest when suddenly the unexpected happened. The hero began to cough out blood after getting impaled by the taller one's hand. And just like that, he fell to the ground as the madman claimed that he must be in possession of the item. The one in the white coat claimed that the boy was lying and that he certainly had the unique item they desired with him. The man then affirmed that what he was after was present, the high schooler's heart, before pulling out the young man's heart from his chest with a mad smile, claiming that he had finally found what he was longing for. When suddenly he opened his eyes, our horrified protagonist finally woke up and found himself inside the classroom. He quickly checked his body to see if he had any injuries, still horrified by what he had experienced. Han Bith then began to laugh, relieved that this scenario was but a nightmare. With that being said, he quickly recomposed himself and decided to head back home, only for a sudden ring to make a chill run down his spine. The horrified hero then turned his head to find someone calling him, leaving him baffled as it was an unknown number, just like in his dream. This left Han Bith terrified, fearing to re-experience this hellish dream. As the phone rang once again, the young man was left terrified. The number from his dream was now calling him in real life. With that, the young one decided to act quickly and dashed with all of his might in order to check the view outside. Everything seemed calm. Everything seemed at peace, seeing how no danger was inside. Our hero, who felt relieved, crumbled to the ground while laughing about his own superstition. But even so, seeing how reality was close to the dream, he still had his doubts. Han Bith picked up the phone and urged the silent caller to respond. He asked the other side of the call time and time again to answer him, even threatening to end the call. Yet, upon being called by his name, the hero confirmed that it was him. And before he could even utter a word, the mysterious voice immediately urged him to flee the school and escape the scene. As the two attackers were getting closer, leaving our hero in a state of panic, the voice tried to instruct the young man on what he should do in order to escape. Yet, some interference made it impossible for him to understand the message. Han Bith asked the mysterious one to repeat what he said only for the communication to be cut off. The young man was left bewildered as he had received ominous instructions without being given any explanation whatsoever. With that being said, he decided to leave the school immediately. Suddenly, the lights went out. With that, the boy was left horrified and began to run as fast as possible, seeing how he was now living his nightmare, meaning that the two monsters would arrive soon. Yet while running, he was struck with a sudden pain that made him trip on the stairs and fall painfully to the ground. The suffering Han Bith tried his best to get up as he cursed his weakened heart that was about to abandon him in this desperate situation. Suddenly, his attention was captured by the sudden sound of footsteps. Seeing how the source of the sound was slowly getting closer, and as two shadows appeared at the end of the hallway, the young man, who desperately tried to escape, began to panic. He rushed to search for a place to hide. Here again, he looked everywhere for the perfect spot until finally they found an open door. Upon seeing this, the boy decided to act quickly. Shortly after, two maniacs arrived at the scene with wide smiles that amidness. The men were searching for the young boy. Meanwhile, the protagonist tried his best to hold his breath as the two killers passed by his hiding spot. The high schooler was terrified of the probability of being discovered. As the two men began to get further from him, the boy started to wait for the right moment. And just as the killers exited the hallway, our hero decided to seize the opportunity. He dashed forward with all of his might. The target was finally outside of the school. And yet, he kept running as fast as possible in order to get away from the mortal danger until he finally arrived and opened the door. And just like that, the high schooler finally regained his home. The exhausted Han Bith was sweating bullets. This experience was so intense that it made him fall to his knees. He was amazed by the fact that he had escaped death. He was also stunned by the fact that his dream had come to reality, seeing how he truly found himself being chased by merciless killers. Han Bith had a hard time processing the recent events and the reasons behind their unfolding. Yet, he decided to shake this off for another time and contact his mother immediately. Only then was he startled by a sudden voice. The voice claimed that it had been waiting for the protagonist for a long time. And just like that, a masked presence appeared in the room. The protagonist was startled and decided to confront the stranger. The man presented himself as an assassin from the Saviors of Light, known as Parrot. He then claimed that the boy was in possession of an object that his organization deeply desired. The horrified young man tried to play dumb, yet Parrot affirmed that he knew very well which object he was referring to. The assassin claimed that he was here for the item inside the protagonist's heart, claiming it to be the gun. The boy was unable to understand what was happening, as the assassin was surprised by the fact that the storage box was in fact a little boy, which was a mark of the unpredictability of a certain group. He then gave the target the choice to either hand him the item or let him take it himself. He claimed that he was okay with both options. Yet to the shock of Parrot, the boy seemed confused as he asked him if he was talking about an actual firearm. Han Bith, who was in a state of panic, claimed that a teenager had no reason for carrying a revolver and that the man was trespassing in his home. This is why he threatened to call the authorities if the man didn't leave. Only then did the assassin quickly close the distance and hit the boy with such strength that he sent him flying into the wall. With that being said, how are you ready to play? The killer then began to ask him some personal questions about his preferences before affirming that he wasn't here to converse about such trivial matters. Parrot, who was certain that the protagonist was trying to play the fool, urged him to give him the item at once. With that being said, he struck the boy's hand with a knife as he ordered him to hand over the gun. Our hero was left in great pain. Han began to beg for his life, swearing that he had no idea what item the man was talking about before begging for mercy once again. Upon seeing this, the confused man burst out laughing as the storage box truly had no idea about the treasure inside it. With that being said, he resorted to his powers in order to telekinetically pull out the kitchen knives. This startled the high schooler as he was witnessing levitating blades. With that being said, Parrot decided to extract the gun himself. As the knives were about to puncture the flesh of the young man, the baffled hero began to pray for a savior, when suddenly, an unexpected intervention occurred. Just like that, blood was shed. In the calm of the darkness, the red began to stain the floor. The savior our hero prayed for came just in time, and it was none other than his mother. The woman quickly checked on her child in order to see if he was hurt. Yet, as his mother fell to the ground, the boy was left horrified. Our hero had a hard time understanding the situation as he now had his injured mother in his arms. The lady then urged her son to flee the scene immediately. Yet the devastated boy refused to leave her behind and was determined to get her to a doctor. The assassin recognized the woman as the one guarding the holder of the gun. He playfully pointed out how she arrived at the right moment, claiming it to be the best moment of his spectacle, seeing how an intruder entered the scene. The man decided to cut straight to the chase. At that moment, the storage box decided to give the one with the mask the item that he desired, in exchange for letting him get his mom to a doctor. At that moment, the woman slipped something into the pocket of her child. And just as our hero began to beg for his mother's life, the woman suddenly tackled the assassin, launching him into the wall with all of her might. Yet, the assassin decided to resort to his power in order to inflict even more damage before claiming that the actions of the lady were pointless. Despite the pain she was going through, the mother kept herself together and activated her ability. This startled the assassin as he was unable to believe the power that was being resorted to. In the end, the lady apologized to her child for keeping him in the dark, claiming that it was for his own safety. Yet, she asked him to always remember how she would always love him, no matter what. And so after the appearance of a great light, a horrifying explosion occurred. Just like that, the street was covered with rubble and fire. All was in shambles. All was destroyed until finally a figure emerged from the rubble. This was none other than our hero, who was in a pretty bad state. He was unable to comprehend what happened to his mother and how she sacrificed herself for his sake. And so the orphan young man found himself with tears in his eyes. The devastated boy began to cry while wondering about this atrocity until he finally broke down, as no sin of his deserved such misery. The young man found this fate unjust and began to beg for it to be but a dream. Yet, as he kept on crying his misery, something began to move not far away. The boy, who quickly noticed this, was left horrified. The rock then cracked before shattering to pieces. From the smoke, the man emerged pleased, claiming that he should have amputated the limbs of the woman, seeing how she managed to combine auto-destruction and anti-human binding. The assassin claimed that it all went to smoke when he tried to enjoy himself. He then added that he was left unsatisfied, seeing how he was being cheated on. With that being said, he decided to resume his hunt for the storage box. Meanwhile, the young man tried his best to escape, running as fast as possible while cursing the situation. Unable to comprehend the ridiculous fact of how is the result of a certain firearm present in his chest, the young man knew that no one would believe him if he ever told about all the paranormal that he had witnessed. Our desperate hero, who was unable to think straight, found his mind clouded. At that moment, he had the idea of running towards the police station, where he would certainly receive protection regardless of his story. Only then did he remember the words of the mysterious voice. After recalling this, he began to slow down before finally stopping. Our hero recalled how he was told to not ask anyone for help and head towards the window where a hotel could be witnessed in order to survive. The protagonist began to think of the call and how it gave him wise advice in order to escape the first two smiling killers. At that moment of panic, our hero couldn't think clearly. Yet, upon reviewing the facts, he realized that he only escaped after acting exactly how he was told to. This made him realize that he would be in danger if he went to the police station. The young man then began to wonder about the mentioned window where a hotel could be witnessed. As such, description fits thousands of places, leaving the storage box with no apparent hint that would lead him to safety. Yet at that moment, the assassin arrived at the scene and quickly located his prey, leaving the boy horrified. The boy's entire body began to tremble with fear. He immediately began to beg for his life. But upon stepping into water, he suddenly looked down and found himself in front of an intriguing reflection. This left him quite baffled. The protagonist finally realized as the mysterious message wasn't referring to an actual window where the building of a hotel could be seen, but a place where the reflection of the word hotel could be seen on windows. And seeing how he just read the word hotel in an inverted reflection, our hero quickly realized that it was the safe spot mentioned in the phone call. But at that moment, the assassin charged at him. The high schooler was left horrified, and so he turned toward the entrance of the building and decided to act quickly, running as fast as possible inside, climbing the stairs as fast as possible. The young man was terrified, seeing how the assassin was drawing closer. Our hero, who didn't know what he should do next, decided to follow the orders of the call and head towards this window, praying that something there would save him. As he drew closer to the room he was headed to, he grew more and more certain that some kind of salvation awaited behind the door. Yet upon arriving, he was left stunned by a horrifying emptiness. At that moment, he was suddenly pierced from behind. Our hero was now injured and immediately fell to the ground. The young man felt himself in a pool of his own blood. The one in pain even struggled to breathe as life was slowly fleeing from his veins. The assassin asked him if he took pleasure in the chase. But our hero, who was on the brink of death, began to beg for a savior. The assassin claimed that he didn't need anybody else around him before asking the boy if he disliked him for being one of the sad clowns, or if it was due to the painful deaths he was inflicting upon him. The mad one then affirmed that their last interaction should be filled with happiness as he asked his victim to smile, as sadness would look ugly on his corpse while going for the final step. He couldn't believe it, and just as the blade was about to puncture his flesh, he begged for a savior one last time. Suddenly, two new figures barged through the wall and burst into the scene. The confused assassin was left baffled. Out here, he opened his eyes and found a mysterious girl with a lollipop in her mouth and a gun in her hand. She then asked the clown to leave before bracing herself and immediately shooting the assassin, who dodged the bullet at the last second. Seeing how right before the bullet could hit him in the mask, the killer used some kind of small barrier to counter it. This one grew entertained to see the two of them arrive at the scene and claimed that they would be powerless in this situation before presenting his excuses, seeing how he arrived before them. But at that moment, the one with stone arms charged at him and punched him with enough strength to send him flying far away through many walls. With the assassin out of sight, the girl took a moment to analyze the situation before rushing to the protagonist. She tried to awaken the unconscious boy, only to quickly realize that he had been inflicted with a lethal wound in the chest area. The older one urged the young Jin Sul to retreat at once, only for her to affirm that she needed to apply first aid. So he asked her to hurry up, as the assassin could break free from his powers at any time now. Only then did the man feel alarmed and dodged a quick projectile at the last second. This left the one with stone arms alerted as the enemy charged at him. The assassin had gained the upper ground and launched himself at the man in the suit with his levitating limbs. He then asked him not to think deeply about the way he broke free of the spell, seeing how he would be reduced into a pile of flesh very soon before unleashing the noise and engaging with the opponent. After knocking the man with the stone arms a few feet away, the killer grabbed his dagger and combined his skills and powers to throw the weapon with an unpredictable trajectory that the man blocked at the last instant. Yet this little sneak attack left him wide open. Shortly after, the man of stone found himself kicked to the ground by the assassin with such power that it sent him flying into the wall. The entertained clown claimed that kicking his weak and soft opponent relaxed his feet before turning to the girl and claiming that she had no right to touch the protagonist. But at that moment, the partner of the assassin quickly got up and charged at the clown once again, forcing him to block his attack. The power demonstrated by the managed to firmly plant the feet of the assassin into the ground. He then began to mark the excess and for his lame one-liner and mocked him for not finding the right words. The clown began to laugh. Jinsu was baffled by this reaction. As the fight began to quickly escalate, the clown claimed that he was facing a terrifying opponent and asked to be more scary. The girl was left alone away as the assassin took pleasure in this fight and even demanded more violence. With that, she talked to wake up the protagonist one more time, and so he opened his eyes while still being in pain. The girl immediately introduced herself to the voice, claiming that she was from the Black Shadows who wanted to rescue him, and that she was the mysterious caller. When asked about the Black Child, those were also here for the weapon inside his chest. Jin-Soul denied, claiming that they were here to shield it, and that she arrived right in time to give him the necessary treatment, as any more delay would have put him in a dangerous situation before asking for his help. Jin-Soul explained to him how there's a protective shield around his heart called a limiter that suppresses the power of the gun. Yet this protective shield that allowed him to live normally has been destroyed by Parrot. With that, she firmly urged him to cling to his sanity in order to prevent himself from being absorbed by the gun, claiming that it was the only way to remain alive. Jin-Soul also asked him to only think positive thoughts, as negativity makes the mind susceptible to the power of the gun, before stating that he should focus on his internal conflict and leave the rescue mission to them. But the boy, who was out of breath as usual, struggled to reply, when suddenly he stopped struggling. The rescuer found herself quite shocked, as the rescue had now passed out, and so she screamed to her partner Taiduk for help. Upon taking a look at her, the man's mind quickly understood what she expected from him, and so, to the shock of the clown, he distanced himself suddenly, before bracing himself and smashing the floor with all of his might. The attack was so powerful that it almost blew the assassin away. After the shock wave reached its end, a hole had appeared inside the floor. Upon noticing it, the killer was left intrigued, as this hole went down numerous floors. So he quickly jumped in it while thinking of how his opponents pretended to attack in order to flee underground and escape. He also began to think of how, even if they had a way to escape, it would be impossible, as the Shadows who had an injured young man with them were too slow, meaning that choosing to escape underground was in fact a lethal mistake. Shortly after the killer landed upon arriving, he was left quite shocked, as the enemy was nowhere to be seen. And just as he began to think of how it would be impossible for the slow Shadows to outrun him, the killer finally realized and looked to her starting point with shock, unable to believe the maneuver that his enemies had just used against him. As Taiduk wasn't in fact trying to make an escape route, but a smoke screen instead meant to blind them, allowing the girl to use her powers, which finally made him realize that his enemies had never escaped by going through the lower floors. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Jin-Soul, Taiduk, and the unconscious protagonist had finally exited the building. The man claimed that they were now in the clear, and so he proposed to go to the midpoint in order to rejoin with Ji-Hyun as planned and erase their tracks, seeing how they had much time ahead, only for his partner to correct him and affirm that they were racing against the clock. As the hero was in critical condition where he could succumb to his injuries at any moment, the one with stone arms tried to argue that not taking the right steps would allow the assassin and the other enemies to track them down, which would either put them in danger or cause a delay, meaning that the original plan was the safest option. Jin-Soo reminded him that their mission was to get the high schooler to safety, meaning that they had to take the risky plan, as his death would mean failure. She urged him to shut up and hurry, seeing how they would be going for the escape point right away. Back then, a gift was presented. It was a gift given by the mother of her protagonist to her younger child, who was eager to see what was inside the box. And so, they quickly tried to open it and found inside it a rather intriguing item. The lady explained to him how this was a locket pendant, which the child was clueless about. And so, she opened the item and explained how it was a necklace that would allow him to store things inside, while showing him a picture of them that she placed in. Umbeth asked her if the beautiful gift was truly meant for him, which she confirmed. The mother wanted her child to give her his word. She explained how this gift of hers had special powers, which is why she asked him to promise her to never put the amulet around his neck after receiving it. With that being said, the lady asked the little boy if she could trust his word. Back to the present, the girl tried to call young Jahan and affirmed to him that they had secured the target. The other side of the line explained to Jeans so how he was at the midpoint where everything had been set in place. But upon hearing that some issues forced them to go straight to the escape point, he demanded an explanation only for the lady to claim that she didn't have the luxury to spare time for a conversation. And so he decided to join them there. Jin-Soul informed Taiduk that the rabbit hole of their colleague would allow them to escape to safety even if they were discovered, meaning that they had to head for Juna building, which was within the range of Jian's ability. The task of the two partners was now to make it alive to the building. At that moment, the oldest of the two realized that something was off. Seeing how they hadn't encountered any opponents up until now, he assumed that this must be some kind of ruse. He needed to be quickly tackled by his junior, who urged him to stop attracting bad luck and praise her for her hard work instead, threatening to beat him up if he had attracted any problems. At that moment, she quickly noticed something alarming and pushed her partner away with her feet, urging him to evade. Just like that, the two of them dodged a quick projectile at the last moment. Something so powerful that it destroyed a small chunk of the rooftop. Upon seeing that the projectile was a bullet coated in leafy, Taeduk realized that they were now facing a sniper. Jin-Sol was once left greatly annoyed by her partner, who attracted bad luck while using her skill detection. The ability of the lady covered a wide area, allowing her to perceive every living soul nearby until finally she was able to detect. This one quickly reloaded, surprised to have witnessed both of his targets dodging his shot. With that being said, he decided to give it a second try, which didn't escape the lady, who urged herself to drag her senior to safety by the tie. For bullets had been fired rapidly using the power of the sniper. None of the 4 shots managed to hit one of our heroes. Just as the hitman was reloading his gun, Jin-Sul informed her stony senior that they would charge a floor 4 once she said 3. But the man found this to be too long. At that very moment, the sniper made his move. And so, the girl shouted the magic word, allowing them to jump off the building at the right moment to escape a powerful shot. With that being said, the 3 of them began to fall head first towards the glass on the 4th floor. Just like that, the 3 heroes enter the next building. The sniper quickly reloaded his rifle and aimed at his enemy, only to be left baffled. The man was particularly annoyed as his targets managed to escape. So he contacted the doctor and apologized to him, informing him of his failure and making excuses about it. The sniper then informed the 2 men in white of the enemy's location and asked them to confront them. Meanwhile, Taeduk, who was annoyed by the fact that the enemy appeared when he was talking about him, began to wonder if the escape point had been compromised, only for his partner to claim that due to the enemy's position, they could assume that they were just tracking the boy, which is why they saw them. This relieved the senior, who realized that the fact that they had been uncovered meant that another enemy would soon appear. Jin-Sul affirmed that they had been lucky until now and that they could now allow themselves to take another route as they had been running uninterrupted for so long. Only then did the girl notice that something was wrong. She quickly turned around and found the young boy shaking. Upon seeing this, the girl urged the young man to stay in his right mind. Only then did she realize that he wasn't only shaking and that his eyes had turned pitch black before beginning to cry obsidian tears. Upon seeing this, Jin-Sul realized that they were now in a tough position. She then shocked him by informing him that the gun had begun consuming the protagonist's consciousness and that if left uninterrupted, the consumption would make the boy blow up in a short time. Meanwhile, inside Han Bit's mind, our hero Tony began to regain his consciousness. At that moment, he opened his eyes widely while being startled. He quickly stood up from his desk. Our hero, who was out of breath as always, was left confused. Just as he began to wonder about his current situation, he mysteriously found himself back in class with his teacher and peers. At that moment, the young man had no idea what was going to happen, and so he began to panic. Back in the real world, the senior demanded that his junior enlighten him on the condition of the boy. So she explained that despite not knowing much either, according to the words of their leader, the gun known as Dead Star always tries to control its wielder, and that despite the gun being sealed now, if it was suddenly unbound, all would go for the worst, as the wielder of the weapon would be affected by the energy it radiates, rendering them asleep in the deepest part of their mind. At that moment, someone called out to our protagonist and savagely smacked him in the back of the head. The aggressor was calling out the young man for attracting the teacher's attention by waking up. Inside the deepest part of the mind, one will be confronted with their worst fear that they desperately tried to run from. If the host of the Dead Star loses his life inside the nightmare, he would die in real life as his body would be overfilled with energy, ultimately making him explode. Taeduk realized that the boy was now a ticking time bomb that would go off if he failed to conquer his fear. The man refused to just wait until the boy detonated himself, and decided to declare this mission a failure and fall back only for the girl to claim that she would find solution. According to Jin-Sol, despite the gun being sealed, the boy should have been exposed to it before. So, there must be a fail-safe, seeing how he had survived this long. With that being said, she began to scan his body, looking for any meaningful symbol or object that could stop the process. Only then did she notice something coming out. To the senior's surprise, the junior claimed that the solution must be present inside the necklace. Yet, upon seeing this, the one with stone arms couldn't find a reason in those words. The girl claimed that she was just as clueless as him, yet assumed that it could wake up the protagonist, seeing how it had a small amount of leafy inside it. Taeduk claimed that this was just positive delusion, only for his partner to assert that it must be it, as a normal boy had a leafy item on him. So he agreed to proceed with her madness, claiming that they would surely meet their demise if the boy hadn't woken up by the time they entered the rabbit hole. And just as the man began to warn about what should be done in case he hadn't woken up by the time they reached their destination, she urged him to shut up as she knew how to do her job. At that moment, the two of them felt alerted as something suddenly moved. They looked above only to see two shadows hovering over their heads. And so, after a powerful landing, our heroes found themselves in front of a giant cloud of smoke. The one who caused it immediately pointed out the simplicity of a certain someone and called out the black shadows for treating an injured man as such. And so the doctor who had just arrived affirmed that he couldn't sleep on such an injustice. Claiming the protagonist to be one of his patients, he promised the black shadows not to harm them if they gently gave his patient back to him, before promising some irreversible damage in case they refused to cooperate. Back in the mind of the boy where he had been slammed into his desk, making him fall to the ground in pain. Our hero was then grabbed by the collar. He tried to admit his mistake and apologize only to be quickly ignored and punched in the face. The hate was so powerful that it made him fly through the desks inside the classroom. The bully was satisfied with a smirk while the bullied one found himself in great pain. At that moment, another harasser decided to join. Han Biff begged for mercy, claiming that he would be better from now on, only to be mercilessly punched in the face. The bully didn't want to hear any of it and proceeded to repeatedly slam the protagonist while asking her if she was aware of the reason behind all of this. And so I lifted him by the hair and asked him to realize that he was being humiliated in public before asking him if he was aware of the reason behind no one intervening. And so when a young boy with tears in his eyes asked about it, the bully affirmed to him in whispers that it was due to him being worthless and someone who is completely useless and only complains before firmly kicking him in the face and affirming that no one wanted to be in his presence. He then kept on stomping on the victim, claiming that his life, a long, frail body, was worthless and a liability to all. With that, the bully urged his victim whom he deemed worthless to disappear, claiming that no one shall miss him before giving him the ultimate kick in this call. The hit was so powerful that it made the necklace of the boy detach itself from his neck. Just like that, blood was scattered in the classroom. As he and the boy fell to the ground, unable to move, the boy began to think and couldn't help but find a reason in the harsh words of the tall one, as his weakened heart would always forbid him from completing his tasks, forcing someone else to do them on his behalf. And despite people being kind at first, no one was patient enough to support his weakness in the long term. Our hero lived like this all of his life, deeming himself useless due to his forever damaged heart. And so he found death to be a sweeter fate than the pitiful life he was leading. But just as he was about to give up struggling, a purple light appeared on the ground. It was a violet flame burning something. This intrigued our hero as it was a picture of him and his mother inside the locket. Looking at this baffled our hero as he was witnessing the precious item fading to the wind like ash. The men in white then claimed that the critical state of the boy was something good, seeing how he risked exploding and annihilating a large area, and stated that he could take the gun out of the boy in order to remove the risk before urging them to make a choice. Jinsol claimed that she didn't expect those in white to be this smart. She then proceeded to use her power on a grenade in order to turn it invisible and threw it as she made a gesture to shoo them away. The doctor was blown away by the cruelty of the black shadow, and just as he claimed that he would now be engaging in the hard way, he noticed the grenade appearing out of thin air right in front of his face. With that, the girl gave her senior the signal to escape. As the grenade finally exploded, the result of the sneak attack was a mad laughter coming from the target. The doctor, who was protected by his partner, was very pleased by how crafty the female shadow was, and so he decided to resort to his companion, Skull, before giving him the signal to move. Meanwhile, inside the dream of the boy where he was getting beaten up, the attacker stomped him on the face one more time. The bully smothered him and compared the boy who clung to life to a cockroach. With that being said, the main harasser pointed out how the protagonist himself was rebuked by his own existence, claiming that he was forced to contribute to society, seeing how he was a human being. And so, he tossed a weapon to the ground, stating that the only way for our hero to be useful was to take his own life. The bully even claimed that this task was so simple that even the protagonist could accomplish it. Back to the real world, the girl tried to contact her ally who had almost arrived at the meeting point. So, she informed him how she was now near June's building and affirmed that someone was after them, which is why she urged him to hurry up in order to open the rabbit hole. But at that moment, Jinsol was interrupted by the attack of Skull, who managed to catch up to them. The girl immediately pulled out her gun, trying to shoot him down in order to fight back. Yet by doing so, she left herself wide open for the doctor, who managed to sneak up behind her. The man then summoned his scalpel before unleashing a devastating wave of slashes, known as incision, that our heroes struggled to evade and parry. The fight was slowly escalating to the top of the building, and at that moment, the black shadows entered one of the floors by breaking through a window. One was now conscious of the position of his allies and demanded 30 seconds in order to perceive. Taduk began to complain about this time limit that he always gave for the creation of the crucial rabbit hole. And as he kept on complaining, he suddenly cracked the wall before completely annihilating it to the horror of our heroes. They turned around only to find a chunk of the building missing. The doctor and Skull managed to catch up to the black shadows. The men in white were particularly annoyed by them. Thus, he unleashed his ability, known as doping, in order to prevent them from escaping, making many needles fly into the air and one by one puncture the vena parts of Skull. With that, the kitchen began to transform as his own bones came out, ripping through his flesh and skin. Just like that, battle simulation was activated. The doctor, who was greatly annoyed by this turn of events, decided to terminate all of his enemies at once as he unleashed his creature at them. Our heroes watched in horror. The girl couldn't believe it, seeing how they were now in a tough situation. Back to the nightmare of our hero. The bullies urged him to take his life at once, claiming it to be very simple and that he should just hurry it up. At that moment, Han Beth tried to speak. Yet, he struggled to let the words come out between his short breaths. Back to reality, the senior informed the junior that they couldn't afford to wait anymore, only for her to state that they should just have a little more patience. Yet he declined, claiming that it was now their only chance to get rid of the Black Star. Tyduk asked her to do what was necessary while he bought her time until the escape exit appeared. At that moment, our hero began to tremble once again, making the girl fear the worst. Inside the dream, the imaginary harasser slapped the hero for not even being able to take his own life. And so, he grabbed the blade on the ground. At the same time, a gun had been pointed at the head of our hero by his supposed savior, who began to pray for him to wake up. Otherwise, he would have no choice but to terminate his life. The bully then praised the hero for keeping up his pitiful existence for so long before going for the final blow. Back to the 2 versus 2. The man with arms of stone was slowly losing ground. Yet in his struggle, he spotted the escape opening, and so he informed his partner that they could now escape and that he was unable to buy her any more time. Seeing how they couldn't wait any longer, the girl now had her hands tied. At that moment, the hand of the stabber was grabbed, leaving him quite baffled. Ha-Onin Bith began to fight back, stating that he had promised his mother to never put the locket around his neck. And in any case, if he found himself wearing it or its picture slowly burning, he would certainly not be present in the real world. And so, upon realizing that he was inside a dream, he decided to punch back the tall one with all of his might, sending him flying and knocking him out cold while making him lose a tooth. Just like that, the protagonist conquered his greatest fear. At that very moment, the hand of the hero that was trembling suddenly stopped, leaving the lady who noticed that quite surprised. Jean's soul found herself unable to believe her own eyes. Certainly, a great shock occurred right next to her, caused by none other than Skull, who was unleashing quite devastating power. He began to overpower the one with stone arms. At that very moment, a great explosion occurred inside of June's building. At that moment of confusion, our hero was grabbed by the shirt and dragged into the rabbit hole with the invisible curl, and the one with stone arms without our hero began to fall. Still as unconscious as ever until finally he woke up startled. Han Bith, who was out of breath, immediately got up being terrified, only to find himself inside the hospital bed. Upon analyzing his surroundings, he began to wonder about his whereabouts, seeing how he woke up in a weird place. The terrified young boy had a hard time remembering the life training events that recently occurred after the end of classes, only that he noticed something near him. Upon taking a look at the pendant next to him, the same locket given to him by his mother, he suddenly recalled how the clown went for the gun inside his heart, and how his mother placed her life on the line in order to save him to the point where she sacrificed herself for his sake. Upon remembering this, tears began to fill the eyes of the young man, and so he watched out of the room, determined to escape as fast as possible. The young man wanted to keep on living for the sake of his mother's sacrifice, when suddenly he bumped into someone. The imposing person turned around and called out the frail boy on the ground for his presence here, in a menacing tone. This greatly terrified the confused one, who immediately began to run away as fast as possible, leaving Taduk quite shocked. Only then did Ha and Bith stumble upon another menacing presence. Someone was complaining about their missing food. The angry swordsman was determined to find the culprit. The terrified young man denied the idea of him touching the food. But as the swordsman noticed the toothpick inside his colleague's mouth, a third someone arrived on the scene, happy to see them getting to know each other. This one claimed that he was here to wake up the protagonist before introducing himself as Baek Muang, the head of the Black Shadows, before presenting the swordsman known as Blue and the two other members. Our hero was left shocked as the two men began to fight over the missing food. As the leader slowly approached him, he exclaimed in a frail and shaking voice that he was just a normal boy who needed to be somewhere else, only to be handed some kind of weird cube. Upon being asked to draw out the gun by Baek Mu-young, our traumatized protagonist was left quite shocked. According to the leader, it was a simple task that consisted of firmly holding the item and imagining it transforming into the weapon. The mention of the item inside his chest reminded the boy of the assassin, and so he tried to play clueless, claiming to be a normal high schooler. But as he kept on pretending, the head of the Black Shadows was called Blue. After a quick demonstration of power, the swordsman suddenly appeared behind the protagonist and ordered him in a menacing tone to draw out his weapon, claiming that the boy had until the count of 3, leaving him quite confused. Hanbith tried to settle things with words, only for the countdown to begin. The crying protagonist claimed that he had never seen a real gun and swore that he was telling the truth. Yet, Blue kept on counting as he slowly began to draw out his blade. With that being said, our hero had no choice but to comply. The traumatized boy then firmly grabbed the cube and began to beg for it to turn into a weapon. Yet, seeing how there was no result, Blue took a deep breath before finishing the count and charging at the young man. At that moment, some kind of black power emerged. Something suddenly appeared inside the hand of the protagonist, which startled the swordsman. With that, a great blast of power occurred, startling them both. And just like that, a horrifying beam of dark energy was unleashed, leaving a horrifying hole in the rooftop, and a swordsman who miraculously managed to avoid harm. Upon seeing this, the shocked young man fell from his feet. He was still unable to believe the fact that he was now holding the rumored gun. The leader jokingly claimed that the boy had betrayed his oath before pointing out that he didn't expect the situation to be this critical and that they would have been in a tough situation if they had proceeded later. When suddenly the gun was aimed at Baek Muang, its terrified wielder demanded that everyone stay away from him. The startled Jean's soul urged him to put the gun away. Ha! And Bith began to cry his heart out, swearing that he just knew about the weapon and was a total ignorant and demanded to know the reason behind this torture. Taiduk tried to reassure the protagonist by claiming that the swordsman didn't mean him any harm, only for the boy to affirm that he wasn't seeing how Blue just pointed his blade at him. Seeing how the hero was begging to be released, the leader decided to reveal to him about his dying condition. This left the young man very much baffled as he demanded an explanation. According to Baek Mu-young, our hero's gun was some kind of parasite that feeds off the host's energy. And while this weapon would try to support a strong wielder, it would refuse any weak one and consume him in order to try and control him. On managed to avoid the worst due to the power of his locket pendant. But seeing how its abilities were limited if nothing is done in 15 days, the boy who fails to control the weapon would become its pawn and suffer a horrifying death. On Bith, who was shocked by the ugly truth, claimed it to be all light while waving the gun all around. But as he shouted that he shouldn't meet his end in such a way, the leader grabbed the gun and made it disappear, revealing how happy he was to see that the boy still had the will to live. The boss then claimed that they would assist the protagonist in conquering the weapon, urging him to follow in silence in order to survive, that they wouldn't get to enjoy a proper lunch, so he shouldn't leave immediately, a negative emotion caused by the hero's brain. As he was now living a life he didn't choose but was forced to embrace. He began to think of how powerless he was to change the past and compared himself to this coffee, which couldn't be replaced back in the cup after being spilled. Later on at lunch, he asked his new friends what they should do next. While the golem and the swordsman began to argue over food, the hero pointed out that he should have this parasite allergically removed from his body. Yet the girl affirmed that the gun was too clean and that the best option would be to accept it. The leader claimed that our protagonist had 3 things he needed to be taught, with the first and second being training on the level of the brain and the body. He would also need to be taught about Li, which is the origin of every energy. The boss even claimed that they should start right away, leaving the protagonist quite confused. Shortly after, our heroes took a bullet train. Our hero began to talk to his mother about how he managed to get an acquaintance to help him take care of the funeral, and that despite the deep grief he felt, he couldn't cry as it would be too dangerous to go to her grave. He began to think of how he had escaped death by a hair. According to Jin Sol, his attackers were a group with the ironic name of Saviors of Light. They are a group of mentally ill criminals who commit many and various types of atrocities. The Saviors of Light are a secret organization with an unknown motive. All members were labeled as criminals, yet each one of them was unique in his own way. This confused the boy, seeing how the police still hadn't intervened. Such a cruel organization would surely make the news. Yet, it was the first time our hero had ever heard of them. So, Blue explained how the members of the Saviors of Light were all Letty users. This confused the young man, which is why the swordsman explained to him how every existent object and being possessed its own energy known as Let, and those with the power to control it were known as Let users. The term refers to the goddess of oblivion, which fits it well, seeing how very few people noticed it, and even fewer could learn to control it. Let manipulation would allow one to exceed the borders of humanity and even gain extraordinary abilities similar to fiction. And seeing how all members of the enemy group could manipulate this energy, they would use their powers to erase traces and memories, making it impossible for the common folk to recognize their existence and very difficult for the government to track them down. This left our hero baffled as he realized that the clown who controlled knives wasn't some unique individual, which the girl found ironic, as this was said by the one with the parasite. Shortly after, the leader unlocked the door, proposing to end this discussion and enter the room. Entering this apartment confused the young man, seeing how the others mentioned going to the base. Only then did he realize as the room suddenly began to change. And just like that, the young man who entered a small room was baffled to see himself in a totally different location that was the way to the HQ. This greatly confused him as it didn't make any sense. Taduk asked him to get used to his new daily experience, while his junior placed the young man into the care of their leader as they would now be hitting the road. Baek Myuang then asked the young man if he wanted to come with him to do the stuff he had to make. He then checked up on the feelings of the young one. With sadness in his eyes, he claimed that he was getting better. The young man then asked how he should address his superior, reminding him that he had joined their team, which is why he asked him to make himself at home. The leader then asked the new recruit if he was familiar with the law of the Red Queen. Yet, the protagonist affirmed to him how clueless he was. So, the man explained to him how this law was derived from a fairy tale where everything moved forward with the Red Queen in order to survive, and compared the current state of the protagonist to this story. As the unleashed gun tried to unleash its power and consume the user, it meant that the user himself had to gain power in order to keep his life. Yet, this wasn't the main issue. The Dead Star kept getting out of control, trying to consume its host if it ever stopped growing, needing our hero in an endless cycle. With that, the leader informed the trainee of how hellish his training would be and asked him if he had any reason to cling to life by enduring such torment. After thinking about this, the stuttering young boy decided to ask for the reason behind the deadly parasite being present inside his heart. The leader only grinned, cracking a soft smile as he claimed that no one knows for sure. The young man, Chuck, affirmed that when his mother asked them to shield her child, she explained the entire situation to him. Despite the many questions he had to ask, the communication had been cut short. Baek Myuang affirmed that with the passing of his mother, the boy would have to live on in order to discover the truth he longed for. The leader then stated that he didn't have any more intel to reveal to the boy. So after thinking for a short moment, Hambith firmly clenched his fist, affirming that due to this situation, he wasn't allowed to lose his life. He would have to live a daily life of pain due to the weapon. And despite his mother supporting him until now, which was the reason behind his survival, he began to wonder about her lies regarding the accident and the life he had been leading. This was why he felt hatred towards his lying mother for the first time ever. And yet he didn't want her memory to die along with him. Thus, our hero was now more determined than ever to live until he discovered the reason behind his mother concealing the powerful weapon inside his heart. Upon hearing this, the leader couldn't help but smile. He then affirmed to the young man that he understood what he meant before grabbing his hand and placing it on the handle, affirming that he should hold it well in order to survive. Before the boy could even process what was happening, the train suddenly began to move. Our hero had a hard time remaining on his feet as the train had been knocked off the rails. After going up a few feet into the air, the heavy vehicle then began to fall back onto the ground, crashing with great force onto the rails. This turn of events detached one of the wagons, which then kept on falling until it finally shattered at the bottom. It was only a matter of time before the rest of the train followed its first wagon. Seeing how there was nothing left to stand on anymore, the young man clung dearly to life, trying his best not to fall off. Hanbith, once horrified and baffled to see the train derail, so suddenly tried to reach out to the leader, asking him if there was any technical issue, only to be left quite shocked by him claiming that the first training had begun. Baek Myuang wanted the young man to walk to him and figure out the truth of his words on his own while hanging above the void and clinging to his life. Our hero demanded an explanation as he was unable to believe that this was part of the training when suddenly the train began to move once again. The young man screamed in horror as he approached the bottom even more. The anointed trainer asked him if he wanted him to restart the train. Hambith claimed that he was unable to lift himself up, which is why he begged for an easier training, claiming that he would do his best. After learning the fundamentals, Baek Myung began stating that this training must be surprising for the young man and revealed to him how it was supposed to reinforce his physique. He stated that for the young boy to complete the test, he would need some help regarding his balance before throwing the purple ball of energy towards the protagonist. Striking him in his core, the holder of the gun was invaded with an odd, painful sensation. Something powerful began to flow into his veins. And just like that, he burst forth with power. At the end of it all, the boy found himself surprised by the blue aura engulfing his body. Yet this energy felt alien to him. So his trainer explained to him how this was the latent energy inside him, and how everything possessed this concealed energy that doesn't usually interfere with the outside world, but awakening it in any special way would allow the hero to make it flow out. The young man was curious about what would happen next. So the leader revealed to him how he would soon feel worn out due to his inability to control his energy, but he reassured him by claiming that it would take a long time. Baek Myung explained to the holder of the Dead Star how he was now in a power-up state that would allow him to double or triple his strength, enabling him to climb up. Our hero had a hard time processing what he was hearing. His trainer explained to him that he would understand it once he tried it. Thus, he tasked him to reach the handle that is after the next one, which would finally allow him to understand the explanation. This baffled our hero. Upon taking a look at the objective and seeing how far it seemed, the young man refused to fulfill the task, claiming that he wasn't able to. He stated that it was already a struggle for him to keep himself hanging for this long. Yet, the leader affirmed to him that this was trivial and stated that he should feel more at ease while hanging now, that he was before the awakening of the inner energy. Our hero was shocked by those words, yet found reason in them. As despite the struggles he faced at first, it was now very easy for him to keep himself hanging after the flow out. And so, as he began to wonder about his newfound strength, the leader urged him to hurry up. With that being said, the young man decided to use the handle near his foot in order to give himself a footing. And so, after taking a deep breath, he launched himself upwards, trying his best to reach the objective until finally he managed to grab onto something. But to his shock, this wasn't the assigned handle. In fact, the young man had reached a much higher objective. And so, as the boy began to scream, overjoyed by his achievement, the leader cracked a soft smile as his point had been proven. Meanwhile, on another train, someone was feeling worried. The one with the stone arms feared that the heart-training test would discourage the motivated and young hero. But as Blue claimed that he had full faith in their leader, Taeduk was greatly annoyed as this one was just opposing him for the pleasure of it. And so they began to bicker once again, leaving the invisible woman annoyed. Jeans, so you'll claim that it was for Han Bith's own good to end his advanced training, as he only had half a month in front of him. Even so, her senior thought that it was still too cruel for a teenager who had just undergone traumatizing events. The girl claimed that this only reinforced her argument, as surviving this immense pain would allow him to wield the gun, which would save them a lot of future training. Unlike physical power, mental strength, which was crucial to the control of the Dead Star, needed time to develop, and that in case the hero was misstrained, he would be consumed by the parasite, making him butcher countless innocents. Meanwhile, the young hero was amazed by the inner energy inside him that was constantly rejuvenating his strength. With that, the young man had faith in his own body and was certain of his ability to pass this test, when suddenly, blood began to come out of the protagonist's arm. The startled young man fell down the train in pain, landing in a safe spot that prevented him from falling to the bottom. HBTH began to tremble due to the intensity of the pain. Seeing how his arm was bleeding and hurting, he reported his injury to the trainer, claiming that he couldn't move due to the pain. This is why he asked for a small break in order to give energy to his arm to heal it, only for the leader to refuse and urge him to keep going. He informed the hero that he hadn't been magically upgraded and had just gained a huge amount of stamina, and that such injuries were meant to happen to his untrained body. The man even claimed that the hero had emitted enough energy to withstand the pain and quickly climb up, and that such events were bound to happen eventually. But as the boy stated that his arm had been sprained before begging for help, his trainer shouted at him to stop making excuses. This sudden change of behavior greatly surprised our hero. Baek Myung explained that this was no normal test, but a trial for survival, meaning that he would have to withstand even harder training in order to remain alive. The leader explained how he was training him based on the demand of his mother, and that he wouldn't stop him from giving up. Yet, seeing how he was still unable to control the power of his parasites, he would annihilate the gun and the host in order to prevent any upcoming tragedy if he ever chose to surrender. As the train kept on dangling above the void, the boy begged for mercy, claiming that he would do his best. And so here again was this fighting, and he looked upwards. With that, our hero braced himself. But I found that doing so, something began to rip inside his leg, making him roll on his back in agony while screaming about the pain inside his leg. Baek Muang asked him to spare himself and surrender, as he wouldn't be able to survive if he didn't pass this test. The young man tried to argue that he was in too much pain, when suddenly something intriguing happened. As the train began to fall once again, leaving our hero horrified, the leader affirmed to him that all of this would be used as if he wouldn't be able to grow and have a month. And that determination was the only thing the boy had left. And so, despite his tears and the pain out here, it is right to ignore it and reach the summit, only to be struck by agony once again, leaving him in great suffering. The boy was very much upset as the hero asked for a timeout, claiming that he was unable to climb back up. With that, the man showcased a disappointed expression before claiming that he had misjudged the situation, as he assumed that the trauma the young man had gone through would have made him stronger. Yet, to his shock, it turned him into a total winner. Our hero was then left shocked as it was claimed that his mother would be ashamed of him. Upon hearing this, frustration began to build up. The leader was shocked, seeing how he was suddenly being forbidden from using those words. Haeon Bith affirmed that the man shouldn't talk about what he didn't know, stating that he had no idea of the suffering he endured due to his condition, which made him a mockery among his peers. The protagonist affirmed that the leader had no right to talk about his mother's opinion so lightly. With that, the boss accused him of faking his injuries and that despite the lifelong trauma he had undergone, he had weaponized the pain. According to the boss, one doesn't easily get used to surrendering, claiming that the young man never tried to make any effort due to his injury. Seeing how acting as a strong person was pathetic in the eyes of others, Baek Muang affirmed that the young man was using this tactic in order to force others to do his bidding. Our hero tried to defend himself only to be suddenly grabbed by the collar and screamed that he should stop thinking about the past and only focus on the upcoming future, where he had to do his best in order to survive. Upon being asked if he was going to keep asking others for help, the boy denied, claiming that he had never done such a thing, asserting that he always tried his best. Only then did he remember one of his friends who always helped him due to his condition. But this also reminded him of how he was once harassed by bullies and how he stood by hiding and watching in silence. Han Bith was certain that he had never asked for help and that he did everything out of his own free will. After a short moment, the leader raised himself and punched the wall of the train. Our hero was left shocked as the entire structure began to tremble. With that being said, the wheels began to roll once again as the train kept on slipping even further into the abyss. With that being said, the leader informed the trainee of how the train would fall in 2 minutes and how he was free to make his own choice. And just as he was about to make his leave, Baek Muang asked Han Beth to stop making excuses for his sinful past. And despite how challenging it is to admit his wrongs, he should always face the ugly truth and embrace reality as one would live his entire life on the path he decides. Thus, he asked the young one to show some grit and confront his weak past self, as it was the only way for him to improve. As once one stops making excuses and tries to patch up his flaws, he'll become someone better who has greatly improved over time. Finally, the leader asked him to quickly make his decision. With that, the young man fell to his knees as the structure moved once again. The train was slowly slipping into the abyss. After arriving at the top of the train, the leader of the Black Shadows pulled out his phone and made a quick call regarding the squad on hold. After putting the phone down, the man urged the boy to quickly climb up. Seeing how they were against the clock, the train kept on slipping. Upon seeing this, the disappointed trainer wanted to announce the failure of his student on the phone. Only then did he quickly notice that a hand was trying to make its way to the surface by grabbing the metal bar. Despite the excruciating pain flowing inside his body, he was doing his best to climb up. The one in pain admitted that the trainer was right about him and that he had always used his frail condition as an excuse to never do his best in order to receive support. Han Bith had a bad habit of bringing out his sickness in order to receive help whenever he needed to flee a certain situation, as it was easier than fighting back. But now our hero was sick of his way of living. As the train finally fell down, the young man's determination had been fixed. He was invaded by a deep desire to change his miserable life. In the end, the young man was unable to get out of there in time. Yet, the leader couldn't help but be pleased by his determination. Due to the constant effort, our hero passed out. I began to fall to the bottom along with the train. The man who saw this cracked a soft smile as he had been satisfied. With that being said, Baek Muang would now keep serving the protagonist as his real training would commence shortly. Meanwhile, somewhere else where Cocoon was present, something began to move inside it on a finally bursting out of the silk. And so, the one inside it fell to the ground while coughing all the strange liquid that was present inside. There were many other cocoons in this place. Our protagonist was trying to recatch his breath while wondering about the weird fluid on him. But as he began to wonder about his whereabouts, seeing how he only remembers the train incident, he started studying the liquid dripping on the top of his head. The confused Hanbith turned around only to find a giant spider right above his head. Upon seeing this, he couldn't believe it and was left screaming, horrified. He had a hard time processing the reason behind the presence of the enormous arachnid. In a move of panic, the young man began to scan the room, searching for an exit in order to flee the scene. Only then did he notice another person standing on the silk above, asking him why he wasn't in his cocoon anymore. He found it quite strange, seeing how the spider silk is usually a steady material. As she began to search for the reach, our amazed hero asked the girl to identify herself, making her realize that she hadn't even given her name. She introduced herself as Bok Solmi, the one responsible for the team's recovery and the one who healed the protagonist after his encounter with the Saviors of Light. Hearing this greatly surprised our hero. And Bithin urged Bek Salomi to get the creature away from him, thinking that he was going to be eaten, only for her to reassure him that the spider was harmless. The spider was presented as Era, who had experienced a sudden growth spurt and whose webs were perfect for recovery, which is why she assured the protagonist, claiming this place to be safe and perfect for healing. Bixi then informed the protagonist that he shouldn't go outside as they would be spending some days here, before pointing out how cute Era was. This left him quite disgusted as he began to think about her words. At that moment, the young man realized something odd and demanded an explanation for the reason they would be staying here for a short term. This made Bake Solm realize that no one had informed the protagonist about the plan, and so as she explained it to him, he was left quite baffled. Shortly after stones were being dragged, someone urged Hanbith to hurry up, claiming him to be too slow. This new trainer was very much displeased with the pace the young man, dragging a huge block of stone, was advancing at, until finally he fell to the ground. Our hero, covered in sweat, affirmed that he had reached his limits and that he would be unable to pass this trial. Yet Taduk affirmed to him that the fact that he could still talk meant that he could do more of this non-lethal training before demanding him to get back on his feet and keep pushing himself until he finally collapses for the sake of gaining strength. And with that, the trainer informed the trainee that in order to rest, he would have to advance with all of his might before kicking him away. Just like that, the hellish training of the protagonist kept going on. Sometime later, he was awakened by drops of water. Hanbith quickly got up as someone explained to him how regular humans were unable to use their inner energy due to their clogged letter channel, meaning that the inner energy circuit would certainly get blocked if he stops the lead from flowing inside. Blue explained that a regular person could only access their inner energy by destroying the clog blocking their system. The swordsman then confused the training by asking him if he could feel his inner energy. And before our hero could even process what was happening, Blue immediately made his move and firmly punched him in the forehead, knocking him away a few feet. Blue then proceeded to ask the one he punched if he managed to feel the inner energy that he showcased. The crybaby, who asked for the reason he was being hit, got bombarded with a beverage aimed at his stomach by the swordsman, who then braced himself before dealing the ultimate punch that sent our hero flying into the trees with such speed that he easily broke through them before crashing into the big one deeper into the woods. Blue was trying to make some spots susceptible to inner energy even more sensitive to let the teenager claim that he couldn't take it any longer and, despite understanding the motives of the man, demanded another way of training. Blue stated that he understood the pain of the young man very well, claiming that it was a struggle that they all had to face and that he could take his time. Seeing how they just needed to attack the same spot again and again in order to make the inner energy burst out, the bloodthirsty swordsman was certain of his method. Sometime later, in another location, a lady was looking at the fancy view. She then pulled out her phone from her expensive bag and asked the other side of the line if there was anyone behind them contacting her. She thought that the caller was worried about her terminating Midori Sour, but upon hearing them decline, she urged the other side of the call to get to the chase. The lady claimed that she had been upset by Quack Han Jun and that she didn't have the energy to chat. And so, while enjoying her wine, it was revealed to her how they had failed their mission despite the first one they had made. And upon being informed about their next step, she was left pretty astonished as it included a rather pricey item. With that, the angry lady stated that her servants were useless and lacked skills. She was very much determined to judge the caller for their failure. And so, as she placed down her phone, the woman called out her servant, demanding him to locate a specific individual overseas. She claimed that it was an easy job that didn't require the goon much effort before firmly advising him to erase all of his tracks. With that being said, the blob known as SSI went to execute the orders of his mistress. Sometime later, someone was trying to awaken our hero. Jean's soul urged him to stop lying in bed and come with her. She reminded the boy how his priority should now be to get physically stronger and have a better mastery over the inner energy, claiming that this would be the reason behind them taking close combat lessons instead of the regular training, as combat knowledge would surely be useful later on. With that being said, she tossed him an item that turned out to be a real firearm equipped with rubber bullets, seeing how he needed to familiarize himself with the Dead Star, meaning that he needed to know how to use a gun. Unbith doubted the fact that he needed to learn about martial arts, as learning to control inner energy and practicing marksmanship should be the most adequate thing to do. Only then did a fast projectile take a small chunk out of his face. As our hero bled and felt pain, the girl expressed how annoyed she was as the boy thought that her lessons were useless. Yet, she couldn't help but resonate with his logic, seeing how he was in possession of a great weapon. And as she tried to clear the misunderstanding, she stated that despite his enormous advantages against normal humans when facing someone who uses Li, he would be immediately obliterated, especially if his opponent has a good defensive game. Jin Sol then bombarded the young man with a barrage of rubber bullets, as she explained how powerless he was and stated that even the slightest opening could give him the edge in a fight as she blasted him away. And so after presenting her argument, she asked the young man if her training was really useless. The trainer then asked him how he expected the outcome of any gunfight as she pointed hers at him. Our hero tried to defend himself only to be shot by a close-range rubber bullet. Shortly after, the protagonist found himself struggling in the healing domain. The girl asked him to stay conscious as she called out her assistant, Spider. The beaten boy who wishes to be taught in normal ways was then covered in spider silk. The torch was burning bright. Inner energy would circulate in the host of the parasite's body once the circuit gets unblocked. If one uses a small amount of letter, the particles inside react oddly with the surroundings. This phenomenon is known as energy activation or letterization according to the library keeper known as Kim Ji-won. Ham claimed that he fathomed the words of the man. But as he asked him to explain once again, the man resolved to his power library of knowledge and activated a bookmark, allowing him to draw out a certain tome regarding inner energy basics, which left the young man quite shocked. Shortly after, an imprint had been deployed. With that, the librarian closed the book as its pages merged themselves into the body of the confused hero. Haith was once shocked to see himself suddenly becoming quite knowledgeable about the subject. Kim Ji-won explained how he was an advanced energy user who could shape his own powers to transfer knowledge into someone's mind. Yet, one had to continuously review this information or risk forgetting everything. Seeing how the young man seemed to have understood everything on paper, the guardian of the library decided to begin the practical part. Meanwhile, someone knocked at the door. The team leader asked the man for the reason behind him staying up this late. This one claimed that he couldn't sleep in peace, seeing how he didn't have the ability to dream. Chao Jihan, the Dian professor, claimed that despite taking sleeping pills on the doctor's order, the arrival of the team leader would surely keep him awake. At first, Beck claimed that this was about a normal visit, only for the scholar to know that it wasn't the case and ask him to cut straight to the chase, asking the team leader if he wanted to accomplish the task he had at hand. He had already completed all of his, only for the man to claim that this was a trivial matter and that they should grab coffee together. Cho Jihan immediately realized that his friend had discovered something and asked him to share his discovery. And so he revealed to him how he found a good witness for the case of Hehound. This made the old man laugh, as these words had resulted in failure in the past. Yet the team leader affirmed that he was natural to fail after countless wins. The professor commented on the spectacular explosion, claiming that if the tragedy occurred once again, our hero would certainly meet his end, only for the employer to reassure him, and firmly claim that his new employee wasn't the average teenager. The librarian explained to the protagonist how letterization consists of giving energy physical form inside or outside of the body, and that water was easy to control with it, stating to the struggling boy that using the inner energy on the element would turn it into droplets. But in the end, the teenager was unable to accomplish the task as he didn't know the right procedure. And so he asked for extra time in order to control water. Yet the guardian of the library began to walk away as he decided to resume this lesson tomorrow. After catching his breath, Habith asked the man if he was using the right method. The librarian asked him to elaborate. So the boy explained how upon reflecting on his training, he found it to be a failing beat-up, and that despite doing his best, he would certainly fail to master his weapon, the time limit. Thus, he apologized for wasting their effort due to his uselessness. Our hero was then surprised as the librarian claimed that he wasn't that powerless. Kim explained how the young man who kept failing had the shortest recovery time ever seen and that he was slowly improving despite all of them doubting him at first. Even after that, the boy still had his doubts, seeing how he was still unable to control inner energy. This made the librarian compare letter training to a dark labyrinth, as just like the rest of the team, the boy was bound to explore this neural maze alone and stumble upon dead ends before meeting success. The words of the man were deeply engraved into the protagonist, as he affirmed that failing trials were trivial if one tried again in order to learn, which is why he asked him to not push himself over the edge in order to grow. As in the end, the state of powerlessness that shackled him would certainly break and let him run free. Sometime later, in another location, our hero found himself jogging. He then began to think about evolution as he dashed forward, that it was something challenging to achieve, as he got easily defeated by Blue. As despite the hellish training he had been put through, it felt difficult to improve. Seeing how the second Beyond Man tried to reach a new level, he would be inflicted with great failure that would return him to the starting point. Even so, such matters became trivial to the protagonist. Han Bith was determined to get stronger. He knew very well that the lack of certainty would make him meet his end without reaching a new level, which is why the young man was more determined than ever to not show any hesitation in order to finally reach a new level and become stronger. Hambith knew very well that it didn't matter that he was bound to fail many times, as he still had some strength sealed inside him. Our hero was determined to succeed in order to finally evolve. And so, filled with a burning passion, the one who surpassed himself let out a fierce roar upon reaching the peak. During marksmanship, none of the cans had been hit. When the time came for close combat practice, the teenager managed to hold his ground. The training became more and more hellish. Yet, the protagonist kept on progressing and adapting to the incoming difficulties, only for his trainers to come up with even more crazed concepts for him to improve. After some time, the hands of the protagonist became more steady, allowing him to finally hit his target successfully. And so,